Well, hello again. This is the second video of this series of videos that I'm doing. It's 7 shots in 7 days. It's inspired from a conversation that I had with my friend, and just came about, as I mentioned in the first video, that I just didn't feel like taking photographs with all this COVID-19 situation going on, an awful situation for thousands, if not millions of people around the world. But so I'm trying to inspire other people, whether to go out and make photographs in the limited space that you have, or give you a little bit of entertainment, if you like, enjoy something that you wouldn't have or be able to have access to at the moment. And as I mentioned again in the first video, I'm very fortunate that I live on a large estate and I don't have to go on public roads to access a lot of nature and forest and hills, etc. I know I'm very, very fortunate. So I hope you at least enjoy some of this and the sounds of nature. I'll try and get some audio recordings of that over the next 7 days, and I'll maybe just play some kind of a vignette. So enough of all that, onto the photography. There's no getting away from the fact that 5x4 format is a commitment. I mean, I've just traipsed. Fortunately, my car is 50 yards from where I'm sitting right now, and I've just lugged this big flight case, which normally contains the camera, but I had it pre-built from 2 days ago. I didn't dismantle it and put it back in the case. I just put it back in the car as it was. But lugging the tripod, and I've got another couple of bags that are sat behind the camera here that I'm filming on. It's got bits and pieces in there, audio, video recording equipment, etc. But what I'm going to do today is, behind me is this a kind of a crazy scene. It looks like a tsunami came through here, and all these trees have wind blown. And obviously what's happened is, maybe one tree's gone over, caused some weight, pushed them over, and this has probably occurred over, a good few years. This is not something that happened in one event. But I thought it'd be an interesting location. I'm not expecting great things. The light was really flat when I first arrived here. I can see some blue sky appearing behind me right now. But I'll get the shoot done. But I thought what I'd do in this video is just go over my particular camera, which is a Sinar P, and this is a monorail camera as opposed to what you might be more familiar with. And there are numerous videos on YouTube showing people using folding field type cameras, and this is a monorail camera. It's large, it's heavy, very, very versatile though, and I'm going to go over some of the features. I'll strip it down, I'll rebuild it through the video, and I'll explain some of the things that it does, and sort of the basic mechanics of it, if you like. So with that, we'll get on to the next part, and I'll start showing you around the camera. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the camera. I'll do the best I can here. I'm using my iPhone. I've got my headphones plugged in, so I can kind of frame up and sort out what I'm looking at with the video camera, but I'll work through it. So essentially what we have as a monorail camera is, you see this central chassis rail here. Okay, so that's the monorail, and then on the front we've got two standards. This is known as the front standard, and then on the back here the rear standard. And these standards move along, if I can just release that, they move along this rail. Okay, so you can see the bellows extending backwards and forwards, and that's the same on the front here as well, and that one slides in and out that way. Okay, so moving on to the back, this is the rear board mount, if you like, and on the back here, if I just kind of go around to my box and grab, this is my screen, viewing screen, and it's a graph lock style, and also the film holder. and that will actually lock into position on this guy here. So let me see, let's put that, excuse me as I'm kind of doing this, all kind of handheld. That locks into position there, and then with this lever here at the top, so that's just sitting in there, lever at the top, push that down, and that's locked in place. Okay, with that done, then we've got at the back here, this is where the film holder will slide into that Graflock style back. Okay, now if you were going to use a medium format rollback, then you can, if you use a Sinar type back, you can load that and then lift this and push it right under the ground glass screen without having to remove it. If you don't have a Sinar style back that will operate like that, then you can basically push these connectors in and then just release the whole. It's difficult to kind of do with one hand, but anyway, the screen actually comes off, and then you can just lock onto the back, a roll film back. So you basically frame up, do your composition, focusing, get everything done with a mask in the ground glass, take the ground glass off, and then mount a medium format roll film back onto the camera. So moving on to the lens board, I use a DB style board. This is a Sinar specific board, and it actually has the shutter built into the board itself. Okay, so on the top here I can control the shutter speeds from B, from a 60th of a second, that's the maximum shutter speed, 1/60th, all the way down to 8 whole seconds, just by moving this thing down here. Okay, so having mechanically timed whole seconds is very, very useful if you're doing long exposures rather than having to use a stopwatch. So if we move around to the right hand side of the camera, on this board you'll see here the control, and that actually controls a pin in the front of the board, which then links up to a cam on the back of the lenses. And if I set that at f45, as the shutter fires, it closes down the pin to the selected aperture on the lens, and I can go from 45 all the way down to 5.6. So if my maximum aperture lenses are 5.6, and pretty much all, I think with the exception of one lens, all my lenses are f5.6 lenses. That is how you select the aperture rather than having to do it on the lens itself. There are two advantages to having that system, but there's also a disadvantage. So the first advantage is cost. You see there are no timing rings, no aperture rings. It's just basically a chunk of glass, and then you can see the cam system there that links up to that pin there on the board. So you might be wondering, well, how do you cock the shutter then if you're not going to cock it on the lens itself? Well, that is a mechanical system that Sinar invented, and inside, if I can just show you in here, there's another cable that runs, let's see, it's from here, and this cable runs in and connects into the lens, into the film holder there. Okay, and like that cable runs down under the camera and then fits into the bottom of that board right there. So I'm just trying to make this a little bit easier for myself, so I'll just put the camera onto a tripod mount here, and it'll just allow me to have two hands. So if I just then pull the ground glass holder and the film holder back, I can then slot the film holder behind the back. If I then push the film holder in, you'll see that what will happen is it closes the shutter. Now that's exactly the same functionality that you would have with a Compa shuttered lens, where you would actually close the shutter down mechanically on the lens itself. Now I did mention two advantages of having this style of shutter board and lenses. The two advantages being, one, the reduced cost in the individual lenses. And the second most significant advantage, of course, is that because I've got the shutter built into the board, my lenses are all accurate as far as timing is concerned from lens to lens, because I've only got one shutter to worry about, not multiple lenses, where with the mechanics in those shutter mechanisms, one might be off. So I might get set up, I might take a shot with a wide angle lens, and then I want to take another shot with a more telephoto lens, and I discover then that the timing was not exact to the 15th of a second on one lens to the other, and so then I've got one frame is completely under or overexposed while the other frame's accurate. The disadvantage to that, of course, is I've got one shutter, and if my shutter fails, my shoot's failed, because I can't use any lenses unless you go to old school, put on a 10-stop neutral density filter, work on the B setting, and just use the lens cap. I mean, there is always a workaround for something, but it limits you, but it's doable. So if your pockets are deep enough, I suppose the most logical backup system would be to have a compare shuttered lens in your kit bag, just in case your shutter board were to fail, and then you can pull that other lens out, say, you know, a 150 or whatever it is, that's a sort of a standard lens, if you like, and you'll never be out of business. So that's a backup, a workaround. Now, there are some exceptions. There are some lenses in the Sinar system that have the aperture built into the lens itself. Like this is a 300mm lens, and it has independent aperture ring built onto the lens, and you can see that functioning like stop down metering. We'll take the lens cover off there. You can see that operates like stop down aperture there. Okay, so it doesn't have the cam that reaches into the plate. It uses its own. Sorry, can you see that? It's kind of all fingers and thumbs, kind of doing this all by yourself. Anyway, that gives you the idea. So if we move on to the rail part of the system, in its standard format, you've got this single rail, which is going to be okay for most shoots, like a 150 lens, or if you're using a wide angle lens. But if you're going to have to shoot with a more telephoto lens, like a 210 or a 300, or you want to shoot more close up, then you may need to have, obviously, bellows extension. And by putting these extra rails, these tube extensions on, like that, you can see that deal kind of just screws on like that. Okay, extends in, and then we just put the blank cap on the end there, and then we can actually slide this rear standard further back to give us a lot more bellows extension, okay, depending on what we're actually doing as far as focusing, telephoto, close-up, etc. And then equally on the front here, you can put an extender onto the front. So I'll just quickly demonstrate that again. To get into the maximum of this bellows extension, but then I could actually put a sort of a support standard, if you like, that goes between the bellows, and I can actually put another bellows in front of that, and I can build those bellows out pretty much as long as I really want. So it's very, very versatile. So with all that said, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to get this thing set up. I got a 90mm lens put on the board, and I'll just leave the camera running, and you can just watch me go through the process. And I'm going to see if I can take a picture of this this scene behind me. Now I'm not really sure what it's going to look like. I don't have any filters. I have a red and an orange and a yellow filter, and I didn't bring them with me in my haste to get everything packed to come and do this video. I did forget to bring them with me, so I've got no filtration, but hey ho, we'll just have a crack, and then we'll look at the image later on at the end of the video. So I'll just crack on, and then I'll bring the camera back on, and you can watch me kind of take this image. Okay, see you in a minute. Well, that was a little bit of a panic. I started to freak out a little bit there. The wind started to blow, the rain started to come, and I'll just turn the camera, this camera around. I'll just show you what I'm kind of working in. It's a pretty dangerous place to be in, I think, with all this deadfall. It's gone down for a reason. The actual soil surface that these trees are in is very shallow, and any wind blows them over quite easily. And they were creaking and swaying, and I almost kind of just picked up and ran away. I was pretty scary. Yeah, so let me just show you what we're looking at. I'm not even sure what that's going to look like. I was so panicked there. You can see from the camera that I had to put on a bag bellows because of the wide lens. It's a 90mm, so in 35mm full frame speak, that's equivalent of about, I don't know, a 30 or something like that. But the two standards need to be very close together, so I had to throw a bag bellows on there. But that's the scene, and as you can see, that is pretty gnarly. Looks like a tornado swept through here. I'm going to pack up. Excuse me, wiping my nose there. It's not COVID, it's just good old snot from a bit of sweat. I'm going to pack up the gear. My car is only 50 yards away, and I'm going to head back. I'll develop this sheet of film. We'll see what we get, but hey, it wasn't really about the image today. It was more about just kind of going over the camera. This might end up being a pretty long video, but I'm out of here, so I'll see you again really soon. So things didn't go to plan. It wasn't until I opened the film holder in the black bag to realize there was no film in there. And you can clearly see that the label says empty. Yeah, I know. I did take another frame and I remetered, got a reading of 6 seconds for the shadows. Somehow translated that as 60 seconds and made a timed exposure for 60 seconds. Way overexposed. Also, I didn't realize that my audio recorder was still on the ground and it was still switched on. And it actually was recording the sound of the wind and the creaking trees, which was really causing me that anxiety whilst I was actually doing the video here. It's all about perspective. It's not that important at the end of the day, but I'm definitely going to go back and photograph that scene when I get a chance. So, see you again next time.